Hey, y'all, welcome back to another episode of Inside the Wave. It's John Burrows. I'm joined as always by Isaac Popper. Make sure you drop a like, subscribe if you're new here, donate to the collective, maybe make an impact on this Tulane athletic department, on the lives of some of these fantastic young men and women that make up the Tulane athletic department, or just enjoy the video. We're excited to have you. Today we're going to be recapping Tulane's dominant win over Navy. 35-0. It puts Tulane in a position to where if they win their next game, first of all, it puts them in a position to where they've clinched an appearance in their third straight conference championship. If Tulane wins next week against Memphis and Notre Dame beats Army, then Tulane will be hosting their third straight conference championship. Isaac, how big is that for this program, and what are your thoughts on Tulane's, really 60-minute domination of a good football team?
Huge, John. Most likely the case. They just have to be ahead of Army in the CFP rankings when those new ones come out next Tuesday night, and then win on Thanksgiving night, 2 days after those rankings come out. Then they will be clinching as the hosts. So most likely they will need Notre Dame to lose, and we don't know what that margin will need to be.
Notre Dame to win. Notre Dame to win.
Yes. And then Tulane, wow. Michael Arata, talked on our preview pod, and usually we ask, what's the path to victory? What's the path to winning? I felt confident in Tulane beating Navy. So I asked Michael, how does Tulane win by 2 scores? And he goes, well, Isaac, I don't know about 2 scores. I just want to win. Obviously, I'd love to win by 2 scores. I think we can win by 2 scores, but a win is all that matters. And Tulane won by a lot more than 2 scores, 35-0. So 5-0 for Tulane. Very impressive. That was the first time that Tulane shut out Navy since 1950. First time that Tulane had a shutout in a conference game in a very long time, and the third ever shutout versus Military Academy. I expected Tulane to win. I'm not sure. I knew that Tulane was good enough to do this. I just thought that Navy would put up a little bit more of a fight. Obviously, has to be mentioned that Blake Horvath, their starting quarterback, did exit the game pretty early on. In part a credit. Obviously, you don't want to see anyone get injured, but it was in part because Tulane was hitting hard, and they knocked Horvath out of the game on really 3 different hits. One by Cam Hamilton was a hard hit. Tyler Grubb sent him out for good, but also Matthew Fobbs-White hurt Horvath's ribs on a sack. And so that was the one that really allowed Horvath not to be able to re-enter the game. And they announced pretty early on in the second half that Horvath was not going to return. However, Tyler Grubbs did hit him, and supposedly Horvath was having back spasms on the sideline after Grubbs' big hit.
Yeah, love winning a football game, but you never want to see a human being get injured. So obviously praying for a speedy recovery for Blake Horvath, sending thoughts and prayers to him and his family. But, you just have to think, watching what played out over the course of 60 minutes in this game, that Tulane was winning this game either way, and they were winning it by a lot. I'm not sure it ultimately had that big of an impact on the outcome. We do have this really cool tradition that we've started on Fear the Wave. So, if you've been with us all season, you know what's coming. We are revealing Isaac Popper's ipop players of the week. He gets his top 6. I have not seen this list. You haven't seen this list, of course, because it's not out yet. But so I'm going to be hearing it for the first time at the same time as y'all are hearing it. And what we've been doing is we've been going 6 through 1. I thought maybe we could change it up, go 1 through 6, and then I was like, no, that's stupid. We're actually going to keep doing it this way. I like the big reveal at the top, although you can normally guess who the number 1 player is based on 6 through 2. But if you're ready, Isaac, I'd love to hear who you have in the 6th slot this week.
I think that you'll be able to guess my top 2 once we only have the 2 players left. But I have some surprises in my top players this week. So I'm curious who you think would be in my top 6 this week.
You want me to guess all 6 right now? I can give you some names.
Yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot.
You did. I was not prepared for this. Obviously, Makhi Hughes is a regular, so I'm Well, actually, real quick, let's discuss the formatting of this. Are you going to tell me if I'm right or wrong now, or am I going to wait and see, or
Let's
do you?
just hear 5 more guesses.
Okay, all right. 10 of 14, buck 38, 2 touchdowns. I'm going to say Darian Minsa probably snuck his way in there. It was a great performance by him. I think Arnold Barnes might actually deserve a spot. 62 yards on 12 carries. He could be just right outside of it, or he could be in there. I'm going to say that's probably it on offense. It'd be between those 3 guys. On defense gets tough. Honestly, that's the thing about whenever you pitch a shutout is that it could really go to so many guys on defense. I know you're a big fan of Sam Howard. I wouldn't be shocked if he's on this list. Matthew Fobbs-White had a pretty good game. Wouldn't be shocked to see him, but I'm going to say he probably just missed out. I'm going to say
more guesses.
My locks are going to be Mensa, Hughes, and Howard, and then my next 3 would be, I think, Arnold Barnes. Caleb Bransall had a nice game. The last 2, it's tough because these last 2 slots could really go to anyone. You know what I mean? Just to play your game, I'll throw in Matthew Fobbs-White, Caleb Bransall. But it really could. I mean, they both had sacks, but it really could go to so many different guys.
I like it, John. And you're exactly right. This is what I've been saying for the last 3 weeks now. Tulane has given up. It's really hard to believe. Well, maybe not, but just no matter how good you are, it's hard to believe that they've only given up 9 points in the last 3 games. An average of
not per game, but total.
And they've averaged over 40 points per game in those 3 games. So I've said this before, but it's really hard to pick on defense who I give it to because the credit's been spread out so much. Whereas on offense, it's the quarterback, it's the running back, it's the O-line, but that's harder to quantify. It's the backup running back here, Duda. Maybe Mario has 2 touchdowns 1 week. But on defense, everybody is doing their job. That was the theme of this week from John Summerall, do your job. And that's exactly what happened. So that's been really showing up in my honorable mentions. If you go to Twitter on ipop stats, when I put out my top players, I also put out my honorable mentions. And the defense for the last 4 or 5 weeks now has had more honorable mentions than the offense, which is in part because more guys are playing. We're really, really deep on defense. Not to say that we aren't on offense, but our offensive starters can play so many snaps, especially on the O-line. They're expected to play every snap or all of it except for a little bit from Caleb Thomas. We're on defense, as Nick Anderson said, who just came on our show, the backup linebackers come in, and you don't even realize they're backups. The same thing can be said at safety. Jack Chienshaw is playing starter minutes. Kevin Adams is basically playing starter reps, and they both look as good as our starters or almost as good. And the D-line is the position that we originally were talking about in the beginning of the season as being 2 deep, maybe 3 deep at those positions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the deepest teams in college football for sure.
I do agree with that. And I like the idea of Caleb Bransall. I did not have a chance to put him in. He had a 3.7 expected points added. So that's how much that play was worth, above average. 4th down stop. Really, really, really impressive defense to get Navy to turn it over. And that was huge. It was a slow game to start, but Tulane was shutting Navy down on 3rd down and 4th down. And so that allowed them to get good field position and keep Navy scoreless, both in pair. Also on defense, I really liked Cam Hamilton this week. He had 4 stops, including that hard hit on Horvath. And he also had a 3rd and 6 stop when it was 7-0, and Navy was really driving the ball going down the field early in the game.
Are these your honorable mentions right now?
Some of my honorable mentions, just my close cuts this week. Just John Batiste, PFF originally gave him a grade that made him the #1 defensive player of the week. They regraded him, but he's still a 90 PFF score. He had a forced fumble,
All right.
didn't play too many snaps, but he did have the forced fumble that Sam Howard recovered, which was a big one, a really important one. And then Fobbs White, as you said, knocked Horvath out of the game for good and played well with that sack. And then on offense, Alex Bauman had a good week again. He's tied for third in the nation in receiving touchdowns. He only has 6 touchdowns, which doesn't pop off the page. But when you put him at that tight end position as such a great blocker and then being tied for third in touchdowns, even though it's not necessarily a huge total, that's really impressive. And he is showing that he is one of the better tight ends in the nation. At number 6 for defense, I went with Tyler Grubbs. I thought that Grubbs really played well from the eye test. The stats didn't necessarily show it as much in terms of analytics. However, he was still third on the defense in PFF score, which I was happy to see because I was a little wary that they weren't going to like him as much as my eye liked Tyler Grubbs this week. He's been having a great conference play, and I haven't given him enough love. So with a team high 5 tackles and a pass defended, I had to give it to Tyler Grubbs in the 6th spot. And number 5, I am cheating again. I know last week I sort of had a bonus player with Lou Tillery. This week I really have a bonus player, and due to Barnes, I didn't know how I could fit in both Makhi Hughes and due to Barnes. I had 4 offensive players this week and only 2 defensive players, despite shutting out a team that, despite being a military academy, has been putting up points on teams. They scored a lot on Memphis to beat Memphis, and they've been a good offense, actually, not even just by a military academy standard. So Makhi Hughes and Duda Barnes are together as my number 5 top player this week. Makhi Hughes had 2 touchdowns. Duda Barnes had a receiving touchdown. Makhi over 20 attempts. Duda over 10 attempts. Analytically, not super impressive games, but when you consider how good that Navy defense is, especially against the run, even though the stats don't necessarily agree with me on that, I watched that game. Navy played them tough, but Makhi and Duda played well enough that they were able to get first downs, keep the drives going, and get into the end zone, none of which Navy did, even though they have been one of the best rushing teams in the country between the quarterback position, although Woodson, not as good of a runner or passer as Horvath, and the running backs / fullbacks and the triple option.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you taking over there for a second. I lost internet, but I'm back. I heard your 5. Just for me, really quickly, don't have to give me the whole recap. I'm sure you gave the viewers that already. But who was your 6? Because I'm trying to check myself.
Tyler Grubbs at 6, and then I go with Makhi Hughes really, and a bonus due to Barnes at 5. Now at 3 and 4, I've got some surprises. At 4, okay, I've got Vinny Murphy, and at 3, I've got Shadre Hurst. So Vinny Murphy was the number 2 center in PFF this week, and Shadre Hurst was left guard of the week, number 1 PFF score among left guards. Their grades, if you go on PFF and you are an analytics person, don't look super high. They're lower than somebody like Darian Mensah, even Reggie Brown this week, who played 15 snaps battling through injury. But when you compare by position, because the O-line does not get enough love, even by PFF, those guys had unbelievable weeks. So Shadre Hurst, congratulations. Vinny Murphy as well. 2 O-linemen in my top 4 this week.
Yeah, I mean, when you run the ball like that against a team known for controlling the line of scrimmage, you can really put any of the linemen in there. I thought about mentioning some, but I didn't know which linemen to put in. And so it's tough when I'm just looking at the box score and don't have the PFF grades. But, I mean, Tulane arguably has the best offensive line in Group of 5 football, one of the best in the country. So definitely deserving for both of those guys.
Yeah, Navy had been considered to be one of the best Group of 5 O-lines as well, but Tulane was able to get to the quarterback, able to get to the running back, some TFLs, some sacks. Tulane let up 0 pressures, 0. I agree. I could have put all 5 starting linemen on this week. I could have put Reggie Brown if he played some more, considering he was such a great blocker as well. And he's been a great blocker. We saw a little bit of a drop off when he came out of the game. Caleb Thomas did a good job playing tight end, but that's not his normal position. He's an offensive guard, and they were using him as a 6th lineman because Bauman got a little bit of a stinger, got the ball knocked out from under him, and got hit early in the first quarter. And so Bauman was out for a little bit, and Reggie Brown was resting for a little bit. So we went with Anthony Miller, 3rd-string tight end, and Caleb Thomas in a 2 tight end set, something that Tulane does more than almost every team in the country by the numbers. But those 2 guys went out for me. At number 2, I think you've guessed the top 2. So now I'm going to go.
Hold up. I got one thing I want to say before we get to 2. You talked about how Navy's O-line was considered good until Tulane played them, but you know what they say, a Crystal 300 looks like a Phantom until a Phantom pulls up. So that's all I have to say about that.
Now I'm going to go with Sam Howard, the only FBS player with 5 fumble recoveries this season, and he is the first player to do that in Tulane history. I could have put him number 1, but I do think the quarterback position is so important, and Darian Mensah played great. So I went with Mensah 1, Howard 2. He not only had another fumble recovery, his 5th of the season, but he also had an interception, his first at Tulane. Now has 5 takeaways in his last 4 games. And in one of those games, he got carted off the field, the Charlotte game. He's made a miraculous comeback, garnering the attention of Pete Thamel, who wrote an article on Tulane this week. Make sure to check it out for ESPN, but also tweeted out before the game that Sam Howard was going to be playing. Obviously, we knew that. He looked great in practice all week and has been ready to play. Number 1, Darian
Isaac, my favorite thing about Sam Howard, he's obviously, relentless on the field. We got to have him on the show sometime soon. Relentless on the field, makes a difference. But my favorite thing about Sam Howard is hearing the way that other people around the program, whether that be teammates, coaches, alumni, the way that they talk about him. That's my favorite thing about him so far this season.
Me too. Uncle Sam, I like to call him. He's got this team in shape, and Nick Anderson spoke really highly of him as well. Nick Anderson, who just came off being the best rookie in the Canadian Football League. The Canadian Football League is a league where Terrence Jones played in after he was a Heisman candidate for Tulane, setting tons of records in the Tulane history books before Sean King, Michael Pratt decided to replace his record. And Terrence Jones was back with the team this week. It was great to see him with some of his teammates as well, supporting the Wave on the team bus and on the sidelines for the game with me this week. Darian had his first career rushing touchdown and really used his legs a lot more than he has in the past, something that the coaches and players were really excited to see. He almost had a second rushing touchdown, but he put his hand down on the 1, maybe the half-yard line, and unfortunately did not get in. He said he thought he got in, but he did not get in. Summerall had also thought he got in.
I thought so too at first.
Duda's receiving touchdown was the first receiving touchdown of his career, so impressive there. And then Makhi Hughes, now 4th all-time in single-season touchdowns, both rushing and total touchdowns, behind Matt Forte, Tajay Spears, and Charles Flournoy. So I think Makhi Hughes has done what he told us he wanted to do in his interview at the beginning of the season and really establish himself in the Tulane record books. I'm excited to have him on again soon, as well as Sam Howard. If you haven't already, make sure to check out those 2 great interviews and be on the lookout for our Nick Anderson interview as well, John.
Absolutely. There you have it. ipop's top players. I look forward at least to doing this again with you next week. What a time to be a Tulane fan, man. Like the video, subscribe, donate to the collective. just not only is it so important that we make sure we're grateful for this era while we're in it, but let's do everything we can in order to extend it and stretch this window as long as possible and set Tulane athletics up for years and years to come. Thanks for joining me, Isaac. Thanks for watching. As always, roll wave.
Roll wave.